Our focus is going to be PhotoPaint for this session. It's often the ignored stepsister of CorelDRAW, and it hosts a whole host of power, and of course this is part of the value that the Corel Suite kind of offers users. I'd like to mention, of course, that in terms of the whole photo editing and image editing kind of perspective and retouching and so on, there's a couple of components that Corel has available to us as graders. I'll just mention this very quickly in passing, and that would be, of course, PhotoPaint, which ships with the CorelDRAW Graphics Suite itself. And also bundled with Graphics Suite in 2018 is Aftershot, which we'll potentially look at next month. And alongside that is Painter, and there's an Essentials version of Painter also bundled in the suite. And then, of course, you have one other, which is PaintShop Pro, and the latest version has just been released a short while ago. Now, what we'd like to do is, the idea behind these sessions are to kind of eke out maximum value for you and I that use CorelDRAW on a day-to-day basis in the work that we do. And as I said to you, what I'd like to do is I'd like to kind of take you through a plug-in free kind of space where you can get best value from the suite. So the first thing I would suggest that we do is to head over to the welcome screen, and there's often tons of value kind of built in here. And of course, I'm not going to look through the paid components, but look at some of the components that you may want to install. So Corel doesn't necessarily force this down your and my throat. They just kind of make broad suggestions. So there you can see there's Aftershot 3 HDR, which has already been downloaded by myself. So it says owned. And Ben Vista PhotoZoom, which is great for upscaling images. And we will be talking about that through the presentation. And then there's a whole host of kind of folds and other free bits and bobs that you can go and download as well. If I were to just scroll down here, you'll see there's a couple of other bundles that you can go ahead and download. There's a couple that I haven't had a chance to download yet. And of course, Corel has got tight partnerships, as you know, with many organizations. So you can go ahead and buy, for example, a Wacom drawing tablets and so on. For your benefit, I'm using a Wacom Mobile Studio. Absolutely adore this piece of hardware, and it works extremely well with Corel's drawing tools. So on that note, let's dive straight in. I'm very fond of Corel Connect. So Corel Connect, again, is often not used very much, but this is the repository for where all of your content, your clip art, your photos, all of those kind of things sit. And what Joe and I thought we'd do through the session is work with objects and images from this particular library. So you can go back to the office and try it out yourself. And you know, as things go, we have an hour, so you know, we'll need to get through quite a bit, and I may not have the leisure of explaining things in detail. So if you miss anything, or you know, if I didn't quite explain myself altogether very well, you can always pick up these images and try them out yourself. And again, as I said to you earlier, we have created a zip file which is available for download. And if you would like that, you can always just ping Joe an email, or you know, message me as well, and we'll happily make it available to you. I'd like to say that during the presentation, I'm not going to be able to have a look at the chat pod. So you know, if there are any urgent matters, please definitely do put it down in the chat pod, and Joe will kind of flag me to any particular relevant questions that may be important at that point in time. Excuse me. So, okay, so let's dive straight in. I'm going to go ahead and, so you'll see that as I work, and I'm quite sure a lot of you are doing the same. Let's just maximize this window out a little bit so you can see it better. I create these trays for all of the work that I do, and then when I'm done with that work, I would simply close the tray down. And for this particular presentation, you can see that I've collected a whole series of images that we're going to be talking through. as well as the PhotoPaint manual. So it's worth probably mentioning that as part of the download stack that we've built for you guys. I've included the manual just so that you have quick reference in PDF format. So that may be worth your while as well. That said, let's go ahead and jump into, so the reason I'm pointing this out to you is, of course, the seamless integration between Paint, Draw, and the other subset tools like Connect. So straight off the bat, as you know already, there's a little Connect icon that you're seeing here at the top of your screen, right? But added to that, if I were to head over to the Dockers here, you see that I have the ability to enable both Connect and the trays directly within the Docker, the subsets here. So my tray has been nested to the bottom, and that works perfectly well. So I've just popped that open, and we'll get straight into our first image. So in fact, as a curiosity, I'm curious to get a sense of how many of us are on 2018. So I'm just going to pop open the chat pod very quickly, and if you wouldn't mind just giving us a sense of what version of Corel you guys are using, you could just pop that into the chat pod. I'm quite interested to know that. So it kind of gives us a sense of how we position the presentation. Anybody? No? Okay, I'll pop back to that a bit later. Okay, so I'll start with Corel 2018 specific features, and of course a lot of what I'm going to be sharing with you you can use in older versions as well. But 2018 is good value for money. Now I don't necessarily get any commissions from Corel for saying this. I'm just sharing this with you as a fellow creative. And what I'd like to kind of point out as well is the kind of stability that, and I must commend you guys at Corel, Joey here, the level of stability that we're seeing with each iteration or new version of the software. It's just that much more robust. I guess with the help of a solidly built interface, operating system like Windows 10 as well, that probably helps quite a bit. But well done on building a nice, robust piece of software. So I'm going to jump straight in here. I'm going to go ahead and open this very first image. I'm going to try and not use shortcuts so you can see exactly where I'm going. I'm going to go ahead and minimize the tray for a minute. So let's get rid of that metadata and minimize the tray. And then I would ordinarily hit F4. I'm just going to do this this way, and I'll choose View Fit in the Window. So that sits nice and straight. And of course, the first thing I'd like to tackle is the artifacting that we get with digital photography. So very much when you're shooting with digital photography, when you're shooting DSLR and that kind of stuff, it's really difficult to get alignment perfect, isn't it? So here's an exaggerated situation there. And the first tool I'm going to talk to is the Straighten tool. So I'll jump straight into the Straighten tool here. Keyboard shortcut Shift F for those of us that like keyboard shortcuts. And we're all keyboard shortcut junkies, I guess, and we learn different keyboard shortcuts. So the fundamental methodology behind this is that we align this to a point of view that we would like to be our kind of horizontal line. And here I'm just kind of playing it against the ladies, against the ladies' legs. We're using that kind of row of plantation in this paddy. I'm going to go ahead and hit the Apply button at this point in time. And indeed, Corel has gone and straightened this out for us. But of course, you can see we have an added challenge, and that is, of course, we've got a perspectival challenge here in that, there's perspectival skew in this image. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and talk to you about another feature, which is the perspective correction. What I've discovered when using the perspective correction is my suggestion to you is not to work too close to the edge. Corel likes a little bit of pixel room, so I'm just going to go ahead and do something like this, where I'm identifying key components of the area that I'd like to work with. So say something like that would be pretty okay, right? And then again, I'm going to go ahead and hit the Apply button. And there we have the image kind of very straight and down. That's looking pretty good. So, the image is ready to go. I can then go ahead and continue manipulating the image as we go along. Okay, so that's one example. I'm going to go ahead and close this out and say no to this. Let's close this welcome screen off as well. Let's say no to that. Jump back to my tray. So by working with trays, I'm never really leaving my editing environment. I'm just staying within it. Now, what's worth pointing out is that I'm quite pedantic about the way color is managed in my workflow, and I want to know if something is not kind of aligning with my color management preferences. And at this point, perhaps I'd like to quickly run through what they are, and I won't take a long time to do this. So if I go Tools Options, I could click here as well. I'll go Tools and I go Color Management over here, and I'll pop into Default Settings. I'm hoping you can see this okay. Just zoom in there, but there we go. And you'll see that I've got a color management setting that is using sRGB, which is good, especially for inkjet printers and that type of thing. If you're working in the kind of lifeless space, or you have a specific profile that you're working towards, you can plug that in here. And I'm working through to Fogra 39, which is a European standard with a dot gain of 20. If you don't set this up at the get-go, you guys, what's going to happen is you're going to end up with it set to North American prepress standards, which means it's going to be standard web offset press. That's going to be sRGB, I beg your pardon, let me drop off my tongue successfully. And then, of course, what you're going to have is you're going to have a dot gain that's way too high. It's going to be sitting at around 20%, and most devices today, especially the digital devices, are just not that high anymore, right? So it's important for me in my workflow to know when something's not aligning to that particular profile and color set environment that I prefer. Okay, so let's go back to that. Excuse me for the technicality there. So this isn't necessarily an error, is what I'm trying to point out. It's something that I would like to know about. So some people get irritated by this, and of course you're welcome to switch it off. I just am a bit of a control freak, so I just need to know, okay, this is the environment that this image is working in. Okay, so still with the perspectival tool, the metadata on this, I'm not sure if we have anybody from the US, but the metadata from this just says Bridge US. I think it's such a romantic bridge, beautiful bridge. And if anybody knows where this is, I'd love to know. So please definitely put that into the chat pod if you know where this is from. Again, if you want to deal with this very much in the same way as you're dealing with color or when you're dealing with spelling, you want to get in there, get the job done, you want to be in a frame of mind, boom, hit the apply button, and Bob's your uncle. So it's that easy, right? So that's the perspectival correction tool. The next thing we're going to go ahead and look at is the healing brush tool. Again, a new feature within 2018 that I think will offer a lot of value to you guys. So let's go ahead and open that up. So I'll go ahead and open this image here. So you know what that's about. Just wanted to point out to you that those are not errors coming up. It's just me being very fussy about the way I work, right? I'm going to go ahead and pick up the zoom tool here. Of course, ordinarily I would hit F3, F4, F2, etc. And I'm just going to zoom into her face, and we're gonna just kind of do a little bit of work on this lady's face. What I'm fond of doing whenever I'm doing a destructive edit for me is whenever you change the pixel values, even if it's for the better in the image, that would be a destructive edit for me. So as a safety net, I'm always wanting to be able to go back to the last saved, or the last safe version perhaps would be the appropriate way of positioning that. Now if you have a look on the object manager on the right hand side, you've got a little icon that represents the background, and if you were to double click on that icon, two things will happen. Of course, the background gets floated, which is really cool, quick and easy, but what it also does is it gives us a copy, and there you can see I've got object 1 and 2. Now since object 2 is at the bottom, I'm now basically hide the eyeball on object 2. I'm working on object 1. And basically what I'll do is I'll start with the clone tool. So the clone tool, as you guys know, is something that has been around for a while. And in my opinion, probably the easiest implementation of the clone tool compared to other competitor products. And that's basically, in Corel PhotoPaint, right-click to choose your source. And let me get rid of that. And then, of course, left-click to paint onto the source, right? So what you and I have discovered is, we kind of soften out the brush, and that would obviously be done up here, and then we feather it out over here, and we kind of then just kind of tap away and kind of clean up the edge as we see fit. But what we're going to go ahead and do here is we're going to use the healing clone. So it works no different to the clone, except it does intelligent cloning. So let's try this. And what I'm going to do here is, because so you can see it's looking not that great, but when I release the mouse, it kind of then recalculates the information, you see. So I end up with a much cleaner kind of setup. So I'm just going to go ahead and remove this little dark spot under her chin, like that. That's good. And then we're going to just take that line, the side of a cheek, back a little bit as well. So I'll just right click maybe around there. This right click thing is just like brilliant. Okay, so you can do this single-handedly. Isn't that cool? And then I'll do one more over here. I'll just pick up that eye bit there. And so this is not my full repertoire of retouching, and perhaps we can do a session on retouching specifically if you guys see the need. Of course, please feel free to put into the chat part what you'd like to see, and we'll definitely craft content to meet those requirements for you. So if there's something specific you'd like to see, most definitely, please do put in the chat part. So allied to the clone, the healing clone tool, and I'm sure you'd agree that that looks really compelling. And the other reason I go ahead and put it on its own object is what you can then do is, you don't want to kind of overdo it where people look plastic, right? So what I then do is I cut back the opacity and bring back a little bit of the imperfections so that it looks all natural. So what I've now done is I've gone and chosen the touch-up brush tool. My strength is set to high. I've got about 100 pixel width brush here. And then, of course, you'll see the brush changing in size. And basically what I'm doing is I'm just kind of giving the skin a little bit of smoothness here. That's looking great. So I'm just going to go all the way around here very quickly. Let's jump in here, and you'll see that the brush is interactively changing in size. Let's get rid of some of those laugh lines. I guess it depends on which side of 30 you sit, right? So if you're on the wrong side of 30, they kind of laugh lines, and if you're on the right side of 30, they wrinkles. So something like that, I guess. Let's just do her neck while we're at it as well. So I'm going to spend a long time because I really can get very absorbed in this sort of stuff. It's quite therapeutic on multiple levels, isn't it? Okay, so something like that. Just going to do a bit more on the cheek. So here's your before and after results then. So let's switch on this layer over here. So that's the before, that's the after, right? And as I was saying to you, what I prefer is not to have it look too plastic. So what I would do here is I would just come in here. I call this constructive destruction. And what I do is I just basically come in and cut this back. In fact, I'll start at 0, maybe about 50%. Okay, a little stronger than that. And then I just go ahead and I build this up to a point where I can see. And what I really like about PhotoPaint is the interactive feedback that the software gives me. So something like that. And that I'm extremely happy with. Okay, so that's the healing clone tool and the healing crash tool. All in one. That was a hell of a crash. I was like, oh my goodness. At any rate, so we're going to go ahead and close that and move swiftly on. The next thing I'd like to talk to you about is something that you and I use all the time, and that's blurring and sharpening of images, right? So let's assume we're working with a brochure or a background for a screen design, web design, or whatever the case may be. And what we'd like to do is we'd like to just kind of create a separation between foreground, middle ground, and background in this case. I'm going to hit F4 here, which will just kind of center this out nicely. And what I'd like to do here is I'd like to keep the leaves in the foreground in focus, and as we move back, I'd like to change focus. Now, traditionally, what we would do is we would go over to effects, and we would do a blur, and we would do a Gaussian blur. And that would work extremely well. The challenge with this, of course, is that we would then need to go ahead and do this, create a duplicate layer and then kind of preserve the layer and all of that kind of stuff. What I found really exciting about the way Corel's taking this is by way of working with lenses. And lenses are real, they're live, and they give us the ability to change our minds. At least your client's going to change his or her mind at least 5 times in the day. So having the flexibility of doing this is something that I would strongly urge you to consider. You just want to keep your workflow as flexible as possible. And by means of that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically go ahead, and you'll see I've got quite a high feather here. Let's take that down to around 30, I'm thinking. It was 39. And I'm going to just basically define the area more or less that I would like to have kind of blur out, okay? I'm going to go ahead to mask, and I really like this feature in PhotoPaint. I think you guys will have lots of fun with this, and that's mask overlay. So you can see the mask visually, and you can see the feathered edge because it's it's impossible to see a feathered edge on a marching edge, right? So what we're going to go ahead and do here, you guys, once we've done that, is we obviously want to feather this out some more, right? So I'm going to go to the mask menu here, and I'm going to go over to mask outline, and I'm going to choose feather. And these options are sticky, so by default it's probably going to be set to something like average, and then you're going to end up with feathering. You're going to end up with kind of artifacting, as you can see. I'm hoping you can see this clearly in the webinar on the top, at least in the projected screen on the top and the sides. But Corel offers us different options here. And the one that would work particularly well in this type of exercise is outside, where we just kind of force out the edges, and you can see that kind of mudding on the rim of the image is now gone. And of course you can have a quick look at before and after. So you can see that the edge is a lot softer. I'm sitting at about 100. And perhaps I want to take this up a little bit more. Let's go 120, what does it say? 120, 123, fantastic. That's a magic number, 123. There we go. I'm going to hit the OK button on that. I'm now good to switch off my mask, so I'll go over to mask and mask overlay. So the mask is off. And then I'm going to head down here to the bottom, and on my object manager, I'm just going to hover over that for a minute. I'm going to click on new lens, and all sorts of interesting things pop up. And of course, in this case here, I'm going to scroll down. It's in alphabetical order, so I'll choose Unsharp Mask over here. And this window pops up. Notice, interestingly, we've got a cool mask taking place here, and it's created a new lens object for us. So preview is on, as you can see. And what I want to do here is I want to just go ahead and push up the, sorry, I chose Unsharp Mask. I actually wanted to do a blur. My apologies. Let's do that again. So I'll throw in a Gaussian blur. I'll show you Unsharp Mask in a short while. Again, it's sticky. So I'll just go ahead and pull this back a little bit. Say to something like that. That looks good. I'm sure you'll agree. It's a pity these workshops are not more dynamic, where you guys can engage with me more directly. So I'm speaking to a screen, and I'm not sure what's going on in your heads right now. So that said, I said to you, well, consider lenses because it's interactive. Well, you could say, well, you've just given me extra work here because you've asked me to do an extra step, and that would be partly correct. So the magic here is, of course, what I can now do is I can click on the clip mask, and you can see it says clip mask over here. And like any other clip mask, what I'm able to do then is I'm able to move the mask up and down. So I'll just move this up to say about there. So the client says, listen, I would like all the leaves in focus, and you go, no problem. So there's no reason for you to recreate this. But it gets better than that. If you were to right-click on this, you can go ahead and edit the lens. So if the client says, listen, it's too much, or it's too little, or the effect is too strong, or whatever the case may be, you guys, you can just totally dive in and go ahead and make those changes. Happy days? Cool. I'm going to go ahead and close that out. I'm assuming you're saying happy days on your side. So I'm going to move swiftly on. And I'm going to jump back into my tray. I'd like to get through quite a bit, so I'm going to move at a bit of a speed. So do forgive me for that. Plus we had the instant quit scenario. So for those of us that are kind of doing print out to canvas, and you're doing your own stretching and so on, of course you're aware of the borders and grommet tool in CorelDRAW. And in some instances, what you have is a beautiful piece of artwork like this, and you just want to kind of get it prepped and stretched. So there's no reason for you to necessarily go to Corel. You can, of course. So it depends on what kind of floats your boat. And here I'd like to share with you how we could get this done. So hit F4 again to center that. How we can do this directly inside of Corel, PhotoPaint. So what you'll want to do is you're going to hit out to this plus on the right-hand side, and you're going to go ahead and open up Prep and Stretch Docker, which is the very last one. In my case, it's open already, so I'm just going to click on it to make it active. And you can see you've got things like resizing the image, cropping the image, and of course then stretching the image. So we're going to focus on stretch here. And there's two types of stretch we can do. We can do a stretch, or we can do a mirror. I'll do a stretch first so you guys get a sense of how this works. I'm going to go ahead and plug in 50 millimeters. For those of us that are working in inches, it's about, what, 2 inches on the nose? Slightly less than 2 inches, I guess. And let's hit F4 again. And what you'll see happening is, of course, you've got the stretch. For me, I find the mirror a lot more exciting. And what's cool about this prep and stretch dialog is that it's live, so we can remove the stretch at any point in time. So if I go ahead and click on that and choose remove, the stretch is gone. So now if I were to go to mirror, I'm just going to keep this at 50 or 2 inches again. And I'm going to hit the apply. And of course, what you can now see is we've got a really cool mirror. So this mirror will then obviously stretch across the frame of your canvas or whatever you might be working with. Very, very handy. And, you know, Corel is really strong in this particular area of graphic design. Okay, so that's done. Let's move on. I'd like to chat to some tools that, you know, you and I may not see very valuable, and I'd like to talk to one in particular. And that's, of course, the liquid tools. So again, I'm going to go ahead and double click on the image, and there she's open right there. Once again, I'm just going to nest it nice and dead center in the middle of the screen. And of course, what I'm finding on this particular image is, you know, the tonal balance is a little out, white balance is a little strong. So I'd like to kind of just fix that very quickly. So I'm just going to go adjust, and I'll choose the auto balance tool just to give it a bit of pop. That looks a lot better. Now, what I'd like to do next is, so I do use the liquid tools quite a bit when I'm kind of doing, especially when I'm working on things like glamour photography and those types of things where you're kind of doing nips and tucks and that sort of stuff. The reason I chose this image though is curiously enough, you know, he's wearing a plaid shirt, and I just like to kind of work on his stomach area a little bit and kind of slim that down. So I'm going to head over to my liquid tools over here, and I'm going to choose liquid attract in this particular case. And then using my drawing tablet, I'm just going to go ahead, and I'm hoping you guys can see this. I'm just going to go ahead and tickle his tummy. Okay, we're just tickling his tummy. There we go. So I'm not giving this the due attention or respect I would normally do, and that's because I would like to just get this done quickly, just kind of give you a sense. There we go. That's kind of a little overdone, but you get the idea. What I would probably do next is just come in here to the effect tool. You'll see it sitting on pointy smear. Go to dodge and burn, right? And I want to dodge the shadows. In fact, yeah, shadows would be good. And then that brush knob is way too small, so let's jump that up to about closer to the 100 mark. Sorry, that was the intensity, I beg your pardon. Let's undo that. Take it back down to 50. I moved the wrong guy, my apologies. Knock that at about 100. Yeah, that's too small still. Let's try 200. Better. And then what I'll do here is I'll just go ahead and get the tonal balance right, you see? That's not working too well. Okay, so about maybe there. Yeah, good. One more. There. So that's basically how the liquid tools work. Okay, so you've got attracts and repels and so on. Okay, once again, I'm not going to save that. Again, it needs a little bit more time. I probably would dedicate about 5 or 10 minutes doing something like that. The next thing we're going to look at is we're going to look at something called Cutout Lab. And we're going to open this adorable guy. I think we should give him a name. Let's call him Maurice. So we're going to take Maurice out from the background. How cool is that? Complementary colors and all of that, right? Nature is the best artist at the end of the day, right? So, excuse me. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use the Smart Carver tool. And to do that, I'm going to go Image, and I'm going to choose Smart Carver. So let's maximize this window out, so we take full use of the full screen, just easier to work with. And, sorry, I meant to use Cutout Lab, I beg your pardon. I'm coming to Smart Carver in a minute. So it's Image and Cutout Lab, my apologies. Let's maximize this guy out. And again, what we're defining is the edge. That kind of brush size is kind of okay. I'm hoping this is coming through okay on the web cast. And very quickly what I'm doing is I'm doing this edge rather quickly. And I encourage you to consider working with the drawing tablet because it makes your life easier, a whole lot easier, my guys. And then what we're going to do is we're going to tell the computer the area we'd like to keep. So we're clicking the fill in the blue area over there. And then I'm going to go ahead and click on Preview Out on the right-hand side. You can see it's done a very compelling job. So let's go ahead and judge this. So that is kind of greeny color. So I'll judge this on a black mat, and that's looking pretty cool. So what, you know, kind of nice dark background. You can see we've got an issue there, right? So what we'll then go ahead and do is just kind of choose the removal tool in the top right over here, and I'll just dive in there. That right side's looking pretty okay. Maybe have a little bit here. Cool. So again, you can go ahead and clean up as you see fit. Now, how you take this out is entirely up to you. There are three options that Corel offers you. You've got the cutout, and original, so it'll give you a copy. I'm going to go for cutout and clip mask because what it does is gives me the flexibility of being able to bring the background again, but it also allows me to deal with edges in a more dynamic way, and I'll share with you in a minute how that happens. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK on this, and we're back in the main scene. Let me see if I can move this window because I'd like to get my object docker back. Bear with me for a minute. There we go. This has more value for me than prep and stretch right now. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is, if you have a look at the top, you'll see that I actually am working on a clip mask. And if I were to click on the image, it will say Object 1. So I'm wanting to work on the clip mask of Object 1. And what I'd like to share with you is how you can control edges using masks in PhotoPaint. Really, really nice. So I'm going to go ahead and choose Adjust, and I'm going to choose Tone Color. And what I'll do then is I call this the hammock. Let's push this out of the way so you can see what's going to happen. Say about there. And I'm going to go to the middle here, and I'm just going to pull down. Can you see what's happening? And you can go the other way as well. So you can either choose to bring in more detail or to cut away detail. Okay, so I would suspect that you guys are pretty proficient at building collages. So you can go ahead and drop whatever background you want to this, and you're pretty good to go, right? So that's Cutout Lab, you guys. I'm going to go ahead and move on. How are we doing on time? Fantastically. I'm going to go back to my tray over here, and then I'm going to talk about Smart Carver. So let's go ahead and look at how that works, you guys. You know why that's coming up, right? So I'll minimize this, and again, we'll go ahead and hit F. So let's say 2 is company and 3 is a crowd. So we're going to go ahead and eliminate this guy. And Smart Carver is this really interesting meshing technology. So, you know, really cool AI that one can work with. So let's see how this works. Again, I would usually make a duplicate. I'm not going to do that in this case, but you know, you guys know how to do that. So again, image and Smart Carver this time. And what we're going to do here, you guys, is we're basically going to go ahead and paint this area out. We're going to remove this third cockatoo from the scene. So I'm going to choose the subtract brush here. And if I move on to the image, you can see my brush is really small, so I'm going to take the nub up. I'm going to take it up to about 100. That's going to be our magic number for this webinar. Yeah, 100 works magically. And then what I'm going to do, you guys, is, again, I'm hoping you guys are seeing the ease of use a drawing tablet gives you, right? So yeah, you know, the mobile studio is quite expensive, but you may want to get yourself, if you have budget, you know, you can get yourself a, definitely do the mobile studio if you can afford it, because it's a, you know, it's a drawing tablet and a computer in one, but you can definitely consider something like an Intuos as well. So what I'm going to now do is I'm going to go ahead and click on this button here, which is Auto Contract Horizontally Remove the Painted Areas. I'm going to do that. This works right for us. It's going to remove that particular element. Now, sometimes what you may have, then you've got the alternative, and sometimes what you guys might have is you might have a scenario where you're wanting to work with content, but you want to either stretch or shrink the background without affecting, you know, your focal point. So here I've gone to the Protect Areas icon, which is the green one. And again, I'll do this really quickly. get it done already, I'm sure you're thinking. Okay, let's paint that in. And we'll paint that in. And we have that. So now what I'd like to do is I'm going to ask the computer to hide the mask for me for a minute, and I'm going to go ahead and expand this. And you'll see that as we expand this, the birds stay pretty well in proportion. What happens when we come in from the other side? And you'll notice that it's kind of working the background, even when we push the parameters quite a bit. It starts to break down after a really long time. So that was about like what, 12 or 15 clicks before it started to say, okay, I can't do anymore. I'm gonna have to start squishing the birds. But you can see that the integrity of the birds is still pretty good, right? Excellent. So I'm gonna cancel out of that, and we're gonna close that off, you guys. And of course, all of these files are available to you. So definitely try this back at the office. I am doing it at a bit of a breakneck speed. So the next thing I wanted to chat to you about is the Unsharp Mask. Now, Unsharp Mask is a de facto go-to for folks that have been in the business for a while, and it comes from photolithographic terms. We're not going to get into that necessarily, but I'm going to talk to you about Unsharp Mask. Now, this is something that would be a destructive effect historically, and now with lenses, it doesn't have to be. So I'm going to make a selection that gives us beautiful tilt shift kind of looks inside of PhotoPaint, and that's the planar mask tool. So what the planar mask tools are going to allow you to do is going to allow you to work with content in a really cool way. So let's see how this works. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is, this is the center point, so this allows me to move elements up and down. We can control content here as well. So for example, if I went in here and I said I want the extent to be 100, that's probably too much. Let's try 50. Yeah, that's better. So that's the extent of the effect, and then of course this is the shadow, or rather the feather values, how soft you want the transitions to be, okay? You can indeed rotate this as well, depending on where you click. And here I'd like to focus, these are dendrites, so I'd like to focus on this dendrite right here. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead, so that's a mask, and if you go ahead and look at mask and mask overlay, you get a sense of how that mask's panning out. It's a real hardcore control over how you are working with contents and mask inside of Paint. So I'm going to just speed this up a little bit. I'm going to go over here to Unsharp Mask this time. In fact, I'm feeling it's a little bit lame in terms of the color, so I just like it to pop a little bit. I'm going to Vibrance here, and I'm going to pop the Vibrance a little bit. I'll pop the saturation a little bit, and let's have a quick preview of that. That's the before, that's after. Lovely. That looks nice, eh? And then I'll do another one with an Unsharp Mask this time, but I want to sharpen just the areas of focus, and this is where this planar mask is going to help me a ton. So I'm going to just go ahead and just, oh, delicious. But a threshold just to bring it down a little bit because it was a bit too strong. And now what you have, you guys, is there's your sharpening, beautiful, and there's your planar adjustment, beautiful, and we're good to go, right? Cool. So I'm going to save that. Let's move on. The next thing I want to share with you is, Joe, this is for you, of course. A rather stock standard kind of shot of Tower Bridge in London. Nothing that's going to get you out of bed in the morning. But let's see what are the possibilities. I'll hit F4 here very quickly, and then I'm going to go over to Adjust, and I'm going to use Image Adjustment Lab. Now, it's kind of sticky, so it's remember what I chose the last time, so you can see I've got a vertical split in this. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to choose Auto Adjust. That's going to pop the color right out, straight off the bat, okay? And then what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and pump up the temperature a little bit. That's looking way more sexy, right? Take up the saturation a touch. Yes, that's looking great. And then I'm going to clip the shadows and highlights. I'm going to take the shadows in. I'm going to take the highlights up a little bit. Nice pop. Now what's cool here is the experimental environment canvas is really sexy. If I click on Create Snapshot, it remembers that, okay? Which means I can continue to experiment, because here I'm kind of happy, but I would like to see what would happen if I added a little bit more saturation and I clipped a little bit more. So I just make my clipping more extreme on the shadows and highlights. Okay, And then I'm going to go ahead and create another snapshot of that. I'm going to switch out to a single view. So that's the previous one, or at least the first correction, and that's the second correction. I prefer the second correction. Click OK on that, and then you've got this beautiful shot from something that was pretty ordinary. Okay, so let's close that off. How much time do I have? I'm going to go for a couple more minutes if that's okay with you, Joe. I'm on the kind of home stretch here. The next thing I'd like to share, is that okay?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I haven't, again, just to remind anyone, if they've got any particular questions on what they've seen so far, please post away.
Okay, there's 3 more we need to get through. I'm going to show you the camera lens flare. I'm going to skip the vibrance because I've done, in fact, I do want to show you tone curve. Okay, let me do this quickly. So I'll go ahead and right click on this, hit the open button on that. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to create a lens flare as you kind of worked out, right? So I'm going to minimize that, and I'll just maximize the window again. And then we're going to go over to Effects menu over here. I'm going to go over to Camera, and we'll choose Lens Flare. It's sticky again, so it knows exactly where it needs to be, so I'll hit the Reset button here, so it goes, and it'll go to the top left corner of the image in this particular case. And what we'll then do is click on this little icon, slap that to the middle. So we've got all of these beautiful options that we can go and play with in terms of size and so on. I'm going to jump over to Raise. I'm going to jump up the Raise, increase the raise brightness. And then we've got that kind of vibe going. Throwing a bit of nice warm color to that. That's too strong. So what I'll do now is I'll cut back the brightness, cut back the sharpness. And we've got this beautiful kind of solar array taking place, as though it's a lens artifact. Okay, cool. So just making up for time here a little bit, guys. We've got 2 more to go. I'll go ahead and open this guy. Beautiful shot, I mean, of this peacock. Hey? What an amazing creature, especially in person. So what we're going to do for starters is we're going to go ahead and we're going to throw in 2 lenses, and typically I would apply an S-curve to the last thing that I do by way of the tone curve methodology. But first I'd like to just punch in some brightness into this image. Let's do that first. Let's get some vibrance and saturation going. So there's the before, there's the after. I'm hoping you can see that on screen. And then what we're going to go ahead and do is I'm going to punch in another lens, and this time I'm going to jump down to tone curve. So before I finish off every single project I do, whether it's this or video or whatever, is I do an S-curve. So I pop the highlights, I go to the quarter tones and I push that up, and then I pop the shadows. And we just get this beautiful kind of Peter Jackson style contrast. So again, there's it without vibrance, and there's it without the tone curve, and now it looks pretty dull, doesn't it? Okay, cool. So let's close that out. And the last thing I wanted to chat to you guys about before we broke out to questions, and that is Ben Vista's PhotoZoom. So this is a plugin that you'll find in the Export For function, and I wanted to share with you how that's adding value. And I want to give a big up to Corel in this. So what Joe and I did in this particular image is we deliberately denigrated the quality of this image. Let's try opening that again. So if I go to image and resample, you'll see over here that it's 72 dpi and it's 100 millimeters, which is what, about 8 inches, I guess. And of course, we'd like to take it up in size. So, I mean, the resample engine has gotten better. It's gone from bilinear all the way to bicubic. If I go ahead and throw in 1,000, I strongly recommend you don't do this. Health warning. And I hit OK on this. Of course, what you start to see is the artifact. Now, this is going to happen because what the computer's having to do is having to make up pixels that don't actually exist, right? So how we can work past this, you guys, is by going and using a fractal engine to calculate the information for us. So you remember that get more stuff I was talking to you guys at the beginning of the webinar? If you were to choose that and jump into this option here, PhotoZoom Pro 4, this is a super method here. I'm going to leave this to nearest neighbor. I'm going to jump this to 1,000, which is going to give us a typical kind of view. Let's do that. 1, 1, 2, 3. So there's a typical kind of view. That line is actually doing the calculation. So fair whack of pixelation. This is being very exaggerated, of course. Watch what happens when we do that. So that S-spline XL basically is using a fractal algorithm, and it gives you a much, much better result. Of course, the one caveat is when you save out, you're going to save out a TIFF, and then you can obviously bring that back into Paint. And on that note, I'd like to say thank you very much for your patience, and apologies for the little crash we had earlier. And I'd like to pass it back to Joe. So Joe, thank you for having me.
Great, thank you, Mo. Thanks very much. So there's just a couple of questions, unless you guys can think of more. Question here is, can you import images that you've created and edited in PhotoPaint into Illustrator?
Yes, so the recommendation I would make there is you save it out as a Photoshop file if you're wanting to take it to Illustrator, just so that you have the flexibility.
Cool. One of our listeners is new to CorelDRAW, is interested to know what resources are available to learn more tips and tricks, websites, books, courses. From the Corel side of things, there is the Corel Discovery Center. So if you Google the Corel Discovery Center or go on to CorelDRAW.com and look for the Discovery Center, there's a huge amount of video content, tutorials, tips and tricks on there that is a very good place to start. We also have CorelDRAW has a YouTube section where there's further videos that you might find inspiration from. Mo, if you've got any books or any other sort of learning material that you've used in the past that you could recommend?
So I would second Joe's comments. The Discovery Center is really, really good. There's a lot of free content that you can work through there. I'd like to give a shout out to Suzanne Smith. She's a great presenter. She has a huge amount of great content, so definitely check out her stuff. In terms of training, I'm not quite sure where the person is geographically. You know, there are a number of authorized Corel training facilities around the world. What we do is we do offer one-on-one personal workshops as well. So if you'd like to reach out to me, if you don't mind the weird accent, we can definitely hook up a few online workshops for you. But to Joe's point, you know, there's a lot of content. And oh, I should mention, Joe, you've got a little hints panel. Let me just move this over to the right a little bit. You've got a little hints panel in each of the apps that talk you through a kind of in context training as well for the person that's new. Welcome to the Corel family.
Brilliant. And the last question came in, which was that one of the listeners finds that CorelDRAW hangs sometimes on specific files. Reading the content can be slow. Any ideas on how he can improve that?
I need a little bit more information from the user. I mean, the type of machine, the operating system, the version of CorelDRAW that they're using. Are we able to get that perhaps in the chat pod?
Well,
or they can. Yeah. Please go ahead.
Yeah, the listener's still there. Please, send that information if you can, and we can come back to you on that with some, specific advice.
So in terms of support, so I'm not trying to dodge the question by any means. We just need a little bit more information. What I found, and I don't get any commissions from Corel for saying this. I use a whole plethora of tools, as probably a lot of people on this call. Is what I found is that there's better and better stability as we move forward. So what we'll need to do in your case, the person that's having problems with file opening and so on, is to just kind of drill down and, by way of process of elimination, identifying where the problem might sit. So might not be able to answer it in this forum, but what I would recommend you do is reach out to Corel support. They're really good. And of course, if you'd like, you're welcome to engage with us after the call, and we can try and help you resolve the problem. Hey, Joe?
Yes, Totally. And the last question was that one of our listeners has a 2017 license. How do they upgrade to the next version? And really, you know, we've got a whole channel of Corel resellers out there, worldwide resellers. What I would say is that you are eligible for the upgrade price. So any existing CorelDRAW customer is eligible to upgrade to the latest version and pay the upgrade price, which is typically half the price of the full version. It's exactly the same, but it's a special price for existing customers. So I would just go to find or Google your nearest reseller and you know, purchase the upgrade license, which you're eligible to do.
And there's something that I come across often, Joe, if I may just add to your point, is, and I don't mean to demean anybody, but oftentimes I find users coming to me and going, hey, I'd like the full version of CorelDRAW. I've got 2017. I want to buy the full version of 2018. And I go, well, why don't you just buy the upgrade, because Corel's offering you this massive discount. And they're like, no, we want the full version. So what you need to understand is it is the full version. Corel is just saying thank you for being a user, a previous user. We're giving you a fat discount, right?
Yes, it is. It is. We do hear that, and it is a bit of a misnomer. But yes, absolutely, the upgrade version is the full version. It's just a special price for existing users. So apologies for that. It can cause confusion.
Yeah, don't spend more money than you have to, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So with that, yes, thank you very much, everyone, for staying with the full hour. Really appreciate your time, and many thanks to Mo for the session today. As I mentioned, it will be recorded, and you'll receive that shortly in your email. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Goodbye.